The Hunter exam arc consists of 38 chapters and 21 episodes of the anime. Now, it is unusually long for a traditional introductory arc in manga, but this just serves to introduce the main cast and overall premise a little bit more in depth. However, I will admit that it did take me a few tries to get through the whole thing, and I was always told that the story does get way better after this arc, and that's not to say that this arc is bad, but it does tend to drag at times. But with that in mind, I will just simply repeat the same advice to anyone who has yet to get through the whole thing. Trust me, it only gets better from here on out. Right, so instead of introducing each main cast member chronologically as they appear in the story, I'm just going to go through each of them here at the beginning so that we can just move through the arc a little bit more briskly. I will explain the basics of their backstories, abilities, and motivations here. Okay, so this is Gon Freecss, a 12-year-old boy who serves as the main character-ish of Hunter x Hunter. Now, Togashi seems to prefer to rotate out main characters throughout the story, rather than just having Gon being the center of every single arc. There are some arcs where Gon does very little, or doesn't appear at all, but for the most part, Gon is the main character. Now, Gon grew up on an island called Whale Island for most of his life, living with his aunt and his grandmother. He is very athletic and finely tuned with nature from his many years growing up in the wilds of the island. Gon's main objective in the beginning of the story is to take the Hunter exam, which, if passed, allows him to join a very exclusive organization, the Hunter Association, that his father, Gon Freecss, is also part of. Now, rather than having any sort of animosity toward his father for abandoning him on the island, Gon figures, hey, if he abandoned me to go become a hunter, then being a hunter must be awesome! I want to be one too! So Gon's overarching quest throughout most of the story is to simply find his dad. Kurapika is the next character, and he's a member of the Kurta clan, so I guess that makes his full name Kurapika Kurta, but he's never referred to like that in the series. And yes, just to clarify, because I was thrown off on it too, Kurapika is in fact a guy. Now, the Kurta clan. It was a small tribe of people living out in the wilderness that have a unique trait that whenever they experience extreme emotion, their eyes turn a brilliant scarlet color. Now, the clan was entirely wiped out, save Kurapika, and all of his family's eyes were stolen and sold off to the highest bidder. In case you haven't realized it yet, Kurapika's tale is one of revenge, and he seeks retribution for the fallen family members and eliminating the group that killed them, as well as acquiring all the scarlet eyes of his clan. The group that wiped out the Kurta clan are known as the Phantom Troop. More on them a bit later down the line, but basically all you need to know is that the troop are also known as the Spiders, and because of this intense hatred for them, anytime Kurapika sees anything related to spiders, his eyes turn scarlet out of sheer rage. Next is Leorio Paradinight, who, despite being the weakest physically in the group, makes up for it by also not being the smartest either. Leorio, in many respects, is the comedic relief in Hunter x Hunter, although there are some arcs where he's put in a much more serious light. Leorio's reactions to situations are sort of over the top. However, looking at the actual situations that Leorio finds himself in, I wouldn't say that he reacts cowardly. In fact, there's many situations where he knows that if he goes with this plan, he's going to be outclassed and he could very well die, but he goes ahead anyway because his friends need him. To sum up Leorio's character, he's somebody that's very loyal, someone that you can always rely on if you're his friend. His goal in the series is not to become a great hunter or anything, rather than to sell his hunter license to pay for medical school. Even in the Hunter x Hunter universe, those college loans will really get you, man. Lastly, we have Killua Zoldyck. Now, Killua is a little bit younger than Gon, but both are around age 12 when the series begins. The dynamic between Gon and Killua is what I would really say make up the main characters for much of the series. There's really nothing all that complex about it, they're just a bunch of best friends that are just happy to have each other given their backstories. Killua is from a family of assassins, the Zoldyck family, which I will go into full detail about when I talk about the next arc, which focuses all around them. But needless to say, even at a young age, Killua's skills are, well, kind of different considering he was raised by a bunch of assassins. He has a wide array of techniques that are both lethal and stealthy. His personality is not what you would expect for an assassin at first. He is unique in the family that he doesn't really want to be one and rather he leaves, meeting Gon and gaining his first true friend. Now, with that out of the way, moving on to the actual first arc of the story, the Hunter exam arc. Right, so the first major hurdle of the Hunter exam arc is actually getting to the Hunter exam site. You see, Togashi really sets up this exam like it's serious business. This is not the kind of thing like you get something in the mail, you know, show up at this building, at this address, at this time, take the test, and then you either pass or fail. This is set up like a very exclusive organization that you really have to use your noodle in order to actually pass these tests. So in that regard, even the process of getting to the Hunter exam site is something that's difficult in and of itself. itself. So Gon, Leorio, and Kurapika all meet each other on a boat heading towards Zaban City. That's the only piece of information they were told about the Hunter exam, is that it's going to be held in Zaban City. So that's their first major hurdle, is just crossing the ocean and getting there. Along the way, the weather starts getting rough, and they have to learn how to work together in order to overcome the storm and properly navigate the ship to the port. Upon arriving there, the ship's captain is so taken back by the way that Gon handled himself on the boat that he gives him a hint to head toward a tall cedar tree in the distance, whereas everybody else is just heading directly toward the city. Gon tells this information to Kurapika and Leorio, and they decide to head toward the cedar tree as well. Along the way, they have to pass this old woman who presents them with a quiz that they have to give the correct answer to, and it's one of those brain teaser things, like, if you were only given the choice, you could either save your lover or your daughter, who would you save? It's one of those things. They give the only correct answer in this situation, which is silence, allowing them to pass the old lady and head up to the cedar tree. Upon arriving there, they meet a group of magical creatures called Kiriko that are able to transform into humans. So they pass one more trial with them, and the Kiriko finally lead them to the proper exam site in Zaban City. And this is where they meet the main cast of the first arc, the people that are all these applicants that have made it this far that are now training to become hunters. The people of note to reference here are Tonpa, who is somebody that's actually taken the exam a bunch of times before and doesn't even care about passing, rather than crushing the rookies that are coming to the exam for their first time. So he's just basically going around trying to mess with people, trying to psych people out, trying to pass out juice laced with laxatives so they can't finish the exam. Basically, he's just a douche nugget. You also have Hisoka, who's a magician clown guy who is terrifying in many respects, not the least of which is that he gets okay, what's the best way for me to describe Hisoka? He really loves fighting. No, you don't understand. He doesn't just love fighting. He loves fighting to the point where he gets aroused. Yeah, so we're just gonna take Hisoka and we're just gonna put him in the corner for right now. The first time we see him, he brutally dismembers one of the other hunter applicants, killing him in the process. So, yeah, just gonna get back to him in a second. We also have Botaro, who is a martial artist that no one cares about. Pokal, who's a guy with a bow and arrow that no one cares about. Hanzo, who's a ninja who I think some people care about. This guy who kind of looks really cool, but turns out to be somebody that nobody cares about. Oh, and Killua is introduced here, who is somebody that a lot of people care about. Killua and Gon kind of hit it off right away. They're about the same age. They don't really know anything about each other, but just the fact that they're not really used to being around kids their own age, they instantly head it off and become friends pretty much by the end of the first stage. We also have this Hellraiser-looking guy named Gita Rocker that just kind of hangs out in the back, doesn't really say anything, and just looks generally creepy, so you don't really have to pay attention to him right now. So, with that being said and everybody arriving, we now begin the first stage of the Hunter exam. Each stage of the Hunter exam is headed up by a proctor or examiner who's also a professional hunter themselves. The examiner of the first stage is Satots. So the first stage of the exam is actually really simple. It's basically just a marathon. The examinees have to follow the examiner Satots just down a long tunnel. It starts off at walking pace, but Satots easily begins to a more sprint, so it basically becomes a full-on race to see who can get to the very end. Now, this run might not seem like that big of a deal at first. You know, you've heard about your 50Ks and all stuff like that. This is an 80-kilometer run. 80 kilometers. That's about 49 fucking miles down this shaft. Alright, so just to give you a general idea on everybody and the level of stamina you need to have to become a hunter in this universe, Togashi pretty much throws the idea that you could be a hunter pretty much out the window right away, because this is the kind of stamina you need to have. And even after getting to the end of the tunnel, they arrive at basically a swampy area called the Milsey Wetlands. That's not even the end of the first stage yet. Alright, that's only the halfway point. An 80-kilometer run, halfway point. So upon arriving in these wetlands, they state, okay, the rest of the exam is pretty much the same. You're just going to follow me through these swamps, but you have to keep in mind that all the creatures in this swamp have evolved to kind of trick human beings into luring them away and then killing them and then eating them. It's a very hostile environment, so you have to be very careful. So the group runs through the wetlands. However, they all pretty much get separated from Satots almost immediately. And this is where Hisoka shows up to be kind kind of creepy, okay? First off, we see that he's in allegiance with somebody else, so he's kind of like, you know, there's some other stuff in the exam going on behind the scenes that we're not really aware of yet, and this is where Hisoka meets Kurapika and Gon and Leorio, and they're all kind of terrified of him. They know that they can't really do anything to fight against him. He just gives off this strange aura, if I was going to say. So they're all really just terrified of him. Leorio ends up getting punched in the face by Hisoka. However, he does state that, you know, he was able to endure his punch, so Hisoka lets him off and actually carries Leorio to the end of the first stage of the exam. Gon and Kurapika managed to reach there as well, and as well as Killua. So all the major members of the main cast managed to get to the end of the first stage, even though Leorio had to get kind of, you know, saved by Hisoka there. The second stage of the exam is headed up by a gourmet hunter, Menchi and Buhara. I guess I should mention at this point that each person that passes the exam and becomes a hunter has to actually hunt something. So Satotes is an archaeological hunter, Menchi and Buhara are gourmet hunters, so they're searching for the greatest tastes in the world. If you've ever read Toriko, you know this right away. Also, by the way, because I'm me, I'll mention it, Menchi is freaking hot and she's got a nice rack. Okay, so the stage is actually very simple. Menchi sends them out to go and capture and cook a certain ingredient. In this case, it's these giant pigs called the Great Stamp. So the group manages to capture the Great Stamp rather easily. It's not really that hard. However, cooking them, you know, nobody really has any culinary experience. So whereas Buhara is very happy about all of the meals, Menchi is very dissatisfied with everything. So she just decides to fail everybody at the second stage. So there you go, that's the end of the Hunter exam. Oh no, if we would only be that lucky and this arc would be that short. You know, it's funny, if the Hunter exam arc did actually end there, it would be like the normal length of an introductory arc. But no, we then now get introduced to the head of the Hunter Association, the one that's the head of the entire exam, the chairman, Isaac Netero. And he arrives in an airship, and, you know, he's like, alright, let's try to figure out what's going on here, because you can't just fail everybody at the second stage. So Menchi decides to rework it a little bit, and the second stage turns into jumping down of a cliff, you know, free falling and grabbing a special kind of egg and then bringing it back up and then giving it to her. So this stage is a lot more simple, but a lot of people still fail, and by fail I mean fall to their deaths, because people die in this exam. It happens quite a bit. Everyone's aware of this. However, the main cast manages to move forward to the third stage. However, before they get there, they have to get on the airship and travel to the next exam site. While on the airship, Leorio and Kurapika are just taking a nap. They're just sleeping to, you know, replenish themselves. Meanwhile, you have Gon and Killua, who are beginning to know each other a little bit more. It's here where we find out that Killua's family is actually a family of assassins, so rather interesting there, and that Killua actually attacked his mother and his older brother and then just basically ran away from home. Isaac Netero sees the two boys, and I think sees some promise in them, and keeping with the trope of being like an old man in a shonen manga, Isaac Netero is, of course, badass. I don't know why I did the air quotes there. He's just bad and ass, okay? So he presents them with a little game. He says, if you can get this volleyball from me by the start of the third stage of the exam, then I will make you hunters on the spot. He's the chairman, so he has that authority. It's here that we see Killua display a lot of really cool assassin techniques, that he's a lot stronger than a standard 12-year-old is. He's able to do a thing called the Rhythm Echo, which is basically like the afterimage technique from like Dragon Ball, where he's able to confuse his opponent with a bunch of like cadences of footsteps. Then after that, he kicks Netero right in the leg so hard that Netero states that if he was an ordinary human, it would have snapped his leg right in half. So Killua is pretty frightening. So Gon and Killua try their hardest, but they simply cannot get the ball from Netero. Eventually, Killua just gives up and decides to go to bed. Gon keeps trying until the morning, until he eventually passes out. But yeah, they were neither of them were able to get the ball from Netero. But it displays, you know, how strong, you know, the strongest member, like the strongest hunter, is at this early point in the story. So the third stage of the hunter exam is where it starts to get a little bit more elaborate, in the sense that the first and second stages did not really take all that long. The third and fourth stage take a really long time to get through, which this is the point in the story where I really started to see how, like, oh my god, how long is this exam? And Tompa mentions that it's anywhere from 5 or 6 phases. So we're only going on, the 3rd phase, which is already long enough. And I'm like, jeez, okay, fine. So the 3rd phase is actually really cool. The airship lands on the top of a giant tower called Trick Tower, and the goal of it is to just get to the bottom. If you can get to the bottom of the tower within 72 hours, you pass. However, the Trick Tower is also a prison, basically, and it holds some of the worst criminals in the entire land. So in order to get down, each group has to kind of, fulfill a different sort of path in order to get to the very bottom. Like, there's different tasks and different obstacles they have to pass through in order to get to the bottom, depending on which, group you are entering the tower. So Gon, Killua, Kurapika, and Leorio, as well as Tompa, are all put into one group of 5, and the path that they have to take is the path of the majority rules. So they all get these really cool watches they put on that has the timer, which how long they have left to get to the end of the exam, and they also have a little X or O. So every time they meet an obstacle, like would you like to go left or would you like to go right through Trick Tower, they have to pick, which way to go, and then majority rules, and they wouldn't be able to go the other way. So that's the basic gist of it here. Eventually they end up facing off against criminals inside the tower. Now at first I thought this was going to be a standard tournament, to see the battle power that Gon and Kurapika and Leorio have displayed, because we really haven't seen anything that they've used yet, except for Killua. Killua showed off his, assassination stuff, but from, Kurapika and Leorio and Gon, we haven't really seen, their battle prowess, what they can really do, you know what I mean? So I thought that was going to be the situation, but it really wasn't. You see, each one of the criminals that is being held in the tower will have years taken off their sentence if they can manage to delay the examinees, because the whole point of this is getting to the bottom of the tower within 3 days. So the more that the criminals can delay the examinees, the more time they get taken off their sentence. So instead of just straight up fights, it's more of tactical and trickery in order to, screw with their minds in order to keep them in the ring as long as physically possible. So basically what happens is Tompa's up first, but he just throws his match right away because his whole goal is try to get Kurapika and Leorio and Gon and the others to fail, so he just gives up his match right away. The next match is against Gon and a prisoner who uses candles, so not really an actual fight. He just pulls out the candles, offers Gon one. He's like, you pick one, then I have one, and then we light them at the same time, and the candle that goes out first, that person loses the match. So this is a match where they're literally just sitting there watching wax burn as to, waste more time. So Gon picks a candle, the prisoner picks a candle, but it's a trick. No matter which candle Gon picked, his candle was going to go out first, but Gon is very clever, thinking on his feet. So when they light the candles, Gon just decides to hold the flame at his candle and then run really fast up to his opponent and then just blow it out. Something that the prisoner didn't think about, so it managed to get away there. The next match is against Majitani, who's this creepy blue dude with a bunch of tattoos and basically is all bluff. He makes it seem like he's this really, powerful badass, but in reality he's just a major wimp. Kurapika appears to fight against him, and Kurapika, this is where we learn about his hatred of the Phantom Troop, who Majitani claims to be a part of. He has a spider tattoo, which triggers Kurapika's scarlet eyes, and to use a parlance, Kurapika just basically beats the shit out of Majitani, and then reveals to the rest of the crew, what's going on with the scarlet eyes and how he hates the Phantom Troop. It's revealed that Majitani's not really a member of the Phantom Troop, he was just bluffing, but yeah, at any rate, he's just lying on the ground passed out. Now, this is something that's kind of neat, that Togashi does. Instead of just, okay, moving on to the next match, you have this moment where it's like, hey, wait a second. We said that this match was going to be until one of the opponents is dead, and yet Majitani is just knocked out. He's not actually dead. So therefore, as long as he stays in the arena, you can't actually progress to the next match. So trying to mess with them. There's a little bit of psychological things here. Leorio basically picks Majitani up, throws him over the edge, and basically just are you alive or not? And Majitani eventually is like, oh no, I don't want to die, and that manages to get through it, but they still waste a lot of time here. The next match is against Leorio and this pink-haired prisoner chick, who basically, Leorio basically throws the match in order to cop a feel, which I'm not saying I wouldn't do that, but this is kind of a situation where, every second counts, and you really want to become a hunter, where in Leorio's case, he wants to become a hunter so he can go to med school. So all this stuff is on the line, but then again, he really wants to cop that feel, so yeah, he ends up losing the match there. The fifth and final match is one that's the star of the show. This is where we have Killua facing off against Jonas the Dissector. Jonas is apparently this horrible serial killer that went around Zarbon just brutally maiming people, and his thing is that his arms, his grip strength is just so strong that he can just basically grab somebody and just rip off chunks of flesh. And we see this displayed when he's like really just like ripping through the stone wall like they're like butter. And then finally he faces off against Killua, who's just this, little 12-year-old kid. And Jonas even says, I don't care anything. I don't care about the exam. I don't care about passing or failing. I just want to taste blood again, So the fight begins, and Killua just moves right behind him and then rips out his fucking heart. Like, just extends his fingernails like freaking claws, just reaches in, rips out his heart, shows it to him before he dies. So at this point in the story, Killua is everybody's favorite character. Like, at this point, I don't really see any other way. Like Kurapika's eyes turn red when he sees spiders, alright. Gon's pretty cheerful and thinking on his feet. Leorio, he comic relief. Killua literally just ripped a guy's heart out. He's the son of an assassin family. He can do all this crazy assassination shit. I'm pretty sure at this point everybody's just like, oh my god, Killua's so fucking cool. Which he is. He really is. So, with that being said, they actually lost some time while facing off against the prisoners. So they have to stay in a room for like 50 hours, which I think is more torturous than the actual fights themselves, because just sitting in a tight little room for 2 days with, they have food and water, and there's a bathroom and everything, there's like a television and everything, but it's just like, sitting in a room for 2 days, I would just be ready just to like rip out my own skin, you know what I mean? But after the 50 hours pass, they're eventually able to get through the rest of Trick Tower. They're actually one of the last examinees to get to the very end of it. And so they just managed to get to the very end at the very last minute, quite literally, and they end up passing the third stage. Okay, so now, moving on to the fourth phase, which is the longest of the phases. The fifth phase really isn't that long, but the fourth one is the longest. They go on a boat to an island called Zevel Island, and the goal here is each one of the examinees has a badge that they've been wearing throughout the entire exam that has their exam number. Like, Gon is number 404, and Hisoka's number 44. It goes by the moment that they arrived at the exam site is their number. So the earlier they arrived, it's the higher the number. Anyway, that doesn't really matter. What matters is that each one of the examinees has a particular target, somebody's badge that they need to get. So basically, they're going to go turned loose on Zevel Island for 1 week, for 7 days. So the fourth phase lasts for 7 days, and their goal is to find their target's badge. And their target also has another target, so it's not like Gon's target is Hisoka, but Hisoka's target is not Gon, if that makes sense. So it's like they're all just kind of chasing after each other to try to get their badges. If they get their enemy's badge, the target that they were trying to, they were designated, then they pass immediately if they can get to the end with the badge still intact. Or another option is they can go and get other badges that are not their target. And I think if they manage to get 3 or 4 of those targets that are not theirs, they still pass. It's like a point system, It's like 10 points for the target's badge, or like 3 or 4 points for a badge that's not your target. Either of those, though, and you can still pass. So this part is the part that I had the hardest getting through personally. The end of it is not bad, but the beginning of it is just it just seems to drag at this point, considering we've just been through 3 other phases. So Gon's target is Hisoka, which means that he's kind of out of his league, because he knows how strong Hisoka is at this point. So Gon spends a good chunk of the beginning of the 7 days just kind of training with his fishing pole, trying to reflexively whip his fishing line out and grabbing a badge and then pulling it back. So he just does this for like 2 days. And then finally, he waits until Hisoka is fighting somebody else on the island, because Hisoka gets very bloodthirsty. And so right at that moment when Hisoka is like all full of bloodlust and he's like distracted, that's when Gon, shoots out his fishing line, grabs Hisoka's badge and pulls it back. However, at the same time he does this, Gon didn't think that the person that was after him, who's this guy that I previously said that everyone thinks was really cool, but no one really remembers the name of, and nobody really cared about, Gon was his target. So this guy works with poison, so he shoots like a powerful muscle relaxant into Gon, knocks his ass out, and then takes both Hisoka and his badge. And so, but this is also the person this was Hisoka's target. So Hisoka kills this guy and gives Gon back his own badge. So now, just to clarify, because I know this got kind of confusing, Hisoka has Gon's badge, and Gon has Hisoka's badge, who he refuses to give back to him. Gon is a very earnest kind of guy. He doesn't like to get things, handed to him or anything like that, so he kind of feels like he genuinely lost, because he was knocked out after he got Hisoka's badge, and Hisoka could have just taken it and went away, but he decided to leave it with Gon, and so Gon is like, you're taking this badge back, even though he can barely move because he has the muscle relaxant and stuff. Hisoka states that, he responds by punching Gon right in the face and says that whenever you can punch me in the face the same way I just did to you, then I will accept that badge back. So that becomes kind of a grudge for Gon. Like, he's like, all right, I'm gonna punch you in the face, because that's how he feels. Like, it was like personal now. Like you handed me this victory. I'm gonna figure out a way to punch you. You freaking clown bastard or whatever. And so after this interchange, after Hisoka leaves, Gon is actually left to recover for 3 days. It's going to take that long for the muscle relaxant to finally, leave his body. It actually should have taken like 10 days, but Gon is really used to being in nature and everything, has really strong resolve. So I guess with that logic, he manages to overcome this poisoning effect rather quickly. It's also during the 4th phase that we find out who Hisoka was communicating with back during the 1st phase. Remember this guy, the Hellraiser dude, Gita Rocker? He actually reveals himself to be a completely different person. He can actually remove the needles from his face and his body, changing his appearance drastically, like he was hiding his appearance for some reason. We don't really know the significance of this dude yet, but suffice it to say, we know he's pretty strong. He then proceeds to go and hide in a hole for the remainder of the phase, so that he's not disturbed, and then he's going to pop out right when the 7 days are over. We also get to see Kurapika and Leorio and Killua going around the island trying to get their badges respectively. Leorio has a good interchange between Tompa. This is where Tompa finally gets removed from the running. And then finally it all comes down to the climax of this phase, where Gon, Leorio and Kurapika are all trapped inside of a cave that is, covered with poisonous vipers, and they can't manage. They have to figure out a clever way to get out, which they do. Gon manages to save everybody. They manage to get out of the cave and pass the 4th exam. So everyone's still in the Hunter exam. We got Gon, Killua, Kurapika, Leorio. They're still in it. So they made it to the final phase of the Hunter exam, phase 5, which is rather short compared to the others. So this phase is basically a tournament, but it's a tournament that is not handled the same way as a normal one, where it's only like one person's gonna pass. In fact, just the exact opposite. Only, out of everybody remaining in the Hunter exam, which are only like 8 people at this point, Kurapika, Gon, Leorio, Killua, Hisoka, Gita Rocker, Botaro, Pokol, I think, and Hanzo, and that's 9. I think there might be one more that I'm not thinking of, but I don't think it's relevant at this point, whoever it was. But anyway, at this point in the story, there's only going to be one person that's going to fail the Hunter exam. So basically, you have 8 people that have passed it already. The first match is against Gon and Hanzo, who's the ninja dude. And Hanzo is way above Gon's strength class at this point. There's no way that Gon can beat him. He breaks his arm. Hanzo breaks Gon's arm. But even after all this, he still has the resolve to not give up and not back down. Even after Hanzo whips out a blade and points it right at Gon's freaking forehead, to the point where it's cutting him, he doesn't care. He's just like, bring it on. I'm not gonna give up. So eventually Hanzo decides to give up instead, which means that Gon becomes the first person to pass the Hunter exam. After this, we kind of cut perspectives where Gon passes out, and then we just see him wake up in a bedroom with Satotes there, and Satotes explains to him that congratulations, you've passed the Hunter exam. It doesn't matter if you think that you deserve it or not. You've passed, and you can't fail, and that's just the way things are. Whatever you make of it is entirely up to you. Presents Gon with his Hunter license, and then that's when Gon asks him, what happened with the rest of the exam, and that's when Satotes explained how the other matches went down. Kurapika fought against Hisoka at one point. Hisoka whispered in Kurapika's ears something, and then Hisoka forfeited, which means Kurapika passes. And so that's something that's going to play later on. Killua was supposed to fight against Pokul, but he doesn't really want to fight against Pokul, so Killua just forfeits, so Pokul ends up passing. The major event here is when Killua fights against Gita Rocker. And so when fighting him, Gita Rocker takes out the needles like he did before, revealing his true form, and then that's revealed that his name is Illumi, and he's actually Killua's older brother, so he's also an assassin. And so Killua is terrified at this notion of not only the fact that he was actually his brother, but the fact that he has to fight his brother. And Killua knows at this point there's no way he could, fight against Illumi. He's just way too strong. And so there's a moment where we see Illumi telling, Killua, asking him, why are you taking the hunter exam, all this stuff. Killua brings up that he wants to be friends with Gon. He doesn't really want to become a hunter, but he met Gon and he's friends with him. He wants to be friends. And Illumi's like, you're an assassin, you have no friends. So he threatens to go and just kill Gon. But luckily, Kurapika, Leorio, and Hanzo kind of block him from doing that. But because of the stupid rules of the hunter exam, which this is something that's weird, it's like, as long as you actually pass the exam, you can kill anybody you want, even if it's the examiners, and you can still retain your license. So that's kind of a stupid rule. But anyway, Lumi's like, I'll pass the hunter exam, and then I'll go and proceed to kill Gon. So he proceeds to use a little bit of hypnotism. It's the best thing I can use to describe right now. We're going to find out what this is later, but I don't want to spoil it right now because this is not the point in the story where we find this out. But essentially, Illumi does something to Killua to hypnotize him to a degree so that Killua ends up killing Botaro, which immediately disqualifies him from the exam, and so everybody else passes. So Killua is the one person that fails the hunter exam. Everybody else, Kurapika, Leorio, Hisoka, Gon, Pokul, they all become hunters. Except for Killua, and I guess Botaro, because, well, he's dead. So, he's posthumously, you're awarded a hunter license. So, at the very tail end of the hunter exam arc, we have Gon confronting Illumi for saying all the nasty things he did for Killua, like, you're an assassin, you have no friends. Gon gets mighty pissed at this, breaks Illumi's arm, and then, tells him you need to apologize to Killua, which he doesn't actually do. But at this point, we learn that the Zoldyck family that Killua was part of reside in the Republic of Padokia, which is a separate country on top of a mountain called Kukuru Mountain. So they know where Killua has went, and we know how to find him. So Kurapika, Leorio, and Gon all decide to head to the Republic of Padokia right after achieving their hunter licenses and finding Killua, and basically, telling them, like, yeah, you are our friend, or we want to see you, and everything like that. So that'll set up the next arc, arriving at Kukuru Mountain, meeting the Zoldyck family, and getting more introspection into Killua's character there. Also, one more thing to bring up here is after getting the hunter license, the gang attempts to find out more about Jean, who is, Gon's father, the whole reason he became a hunter. But we find out that all the information about him is under, like, lock and key. Like, it's very classified information. So he's not just a hunter. He's, like, a really important hunter. That's what we find out. And Satotes also mentions, not to Gon in the group, but he mentions to the other examiners that there's actually, the hunter exam is not over yet. There's actually a hidden part of the hunter exam that we'll get into later on down the story. So basically, that is the first arc of Hunter x Hunter. Even my recap of it is very long, but that's really the first hurdle you have to get over. Maybe that's the way Tagashi played it out. Like, in order to really get into and love my manga, you're gonna have to sit through this long-ass introductory arc. If you liked it, good for you. I would state it's pretty average. There's points of it that I really liked quite a bit, particularly focused around the end with, like, Killua facing off against Illumi, and Gon and Hisoka's confrontation. That was a big moment there. I like some moments in the Trick Tower that were pretty good, especially, like, Killua fighting against Jonas. But overall, it's nothing that really impressive, considering when you stack it up with the other arcs in Hunter x Hunter. It gets so much better from here. I mean, it really took me about 3 or 4 tries to get through the entire first arc. But after I finally did, it really moved at a much quicker pace at that point, and I didn't find myself getting hung up on an arc the same way that I got hung up on the Hunter exam arc. So if you liked it, hey, good for you. You're gonna love Hunter x Hunter. If you love the Hunter exam arc, like, wow, this is so cool, then it's only gonna get much higher for you, dude. But if you didn't like it, or if you found it kind of dragged at times, just slog through it, man. Just slog through it. 20 episodes, 38 chapters, and if you can get through that, you're gonna be good. So next time, we're gonna be discussing the Zoldyck family arc. So catch you back here next time, everybody. Signing out.